And we're live. Can you still hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Beautiful. So we're back on the live stream with me, Carbon Mike, and my man Nick Buckley. How's everything? How how's
Yep,
the
with me, everything is fine. I was poorly last week. I don't know what I had, but it knocked me for six for a couple of days. But I'm almost back to normal again now.
Oh, okay. That's good to hear. Yeah, we're it's funny to hear people talk about to hear people talk about being ill and what have you. Um it feels like we're slowly getting back to the point where being ill is just being ill, and it doesn't mean everyone starts freaking out about it like it's the end of the world. Um, but
Yeah,
then,
I think you've got a really good point. Now. I never thought of it like that.
yeah,
Nobody, yeah, last 2 years, nobody tells you they're ill anymore now because in case it scares the life out of you.
that's right, that's right, and yeah. So, but now it also feels like we're back to this whole thing of freaking out. Like there's something new to freak out about now, so it
Yeah,
seems like the powers that be milked the last big viral freak out for all it was worth. And it was worth a lot to them if you look at the dividend payouts from Pfizer. But now there's another one.
yeah. Most governments and most dictators always want the population looking in a particular direction.
Yeah,
Because if they're looking in that direction, it means they're not looking at us.
that's right, that's right. And yeah, this is definitely true, because if you think about, I mean, just Jesus Christ, if you just think about state malfeasance, if you think about um, the now right now the set of avoidable catastrophes that are bearing down on us, um, yeah, they're desperate for us to be looking at something else. Freak out about
Yeah,
something, just don't actually pay attention to what we're doing.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. What they're basically saying is, please don't ask us why we're running out of energy.
Right, right. For one example, that's
Yeah,
exactly right. Well, I mean, you're in your network. I mean, well, you and I were on a live chat with the society, the Foundation Society on Sunday, and one of my people works with carers, right? And he's, in his circle, people are already nervous. What are you seeing in terms of? I mean, do you get the sense that? Okay, let me back up. Certainly, people like us, we're following this stuff very closely. We kind of geek out about it. But do you get the sense that the reality is starting to hit home for a lot of people now, or are people still kind of tuned out? What's your sense like on the ground there in the UK where you are?
do you mean in terms of the living crisis?
Yeah,
Yeah,
specifically in terms of energy and
yeah.
what's coming, and are people kind of tuned into that for the most part?
They are to a small extent.
Mm,
So the people who are really worried and talking about it are the ones where it's already hit them. So
mm,
that they already were struggling for money. They already weren't in the best position, such as they were in private rented housing. So that's £1,000 now outside of London, which is horrendous. So
yes.
they haven't got much disposable income anyway. Prices in the shops are going up, which everyone's talking about, and it's affecting them already. But I think there's still a large proportion of the population who have noticed the prices going up in the shops, and it's not nice, but they're still okay. And they don't know how serious this is yet until this continues and it starts hitting other things and everything else starts going up. So I think there's a bit of a lag going on.
Yeah. And I guess your government took some steps to try to lessen the hit as far as energy costs are concerned. Is that correct?
Yes, but for me, it was the wrong thing altogether.
Yes, I
So
agree.
our government now has turned into the USSR. It's basically a socialist government. So it's always about what can we give you? And what they should be doing in the UK now is cutting the taxes of the energy we pay.
Yes.
So a
Yes.
good example is our electricity bills in the UK. 25% of your bill is a green tax, and
Jesus.
5% of it is VAT, which is another government tax. So that's 30% of your bill is taxes. So instead of giving us some money, why don't you just knock off 30% off the bill?
Correct. This is a thing I've noticed. Is that they never seem to want to they never seem to want to do anything that actually cuts into their revenue, only ours. I'll give you an example. Um, Here, at some point in the during the great viral freakout of the last year and change, in New York City, they decided that there was going to be a moratorium on evictions. Basically, it was a rent holiday.
Yeah.
So if you were living in an apartment, um, and if you just decided to stop paying rent, then the landlord could take no action. He just had to deal with it as you didn't pay rent for however many months.
We had the
Um,
same in the UK.
Same in the UK, right? Now, what's interesting to me is that I didn't recall anything like, okay, for example, here in New York City, people get parking tickets, they get whatever kind of fines and fees piled on them from this and that and whatever. They never announced a general amnesty on fines and fees.
Yeah.
They didn't announce a general thing of, okay, all your parking tickets are null and void. We're going to go into this, we're going to zero those out. Okay, it's only when you know you're paying someone else, and look, your landlord might be just another guy like you who bought a house and who is just renting apartments to pay the mortgage. That's the way it is for a lot of people in New
Yeah.
York City, especially in my part of New York, especially in Brooklyn. There's a lot of people who just they're not property management companies. They're just ordinary folks who happen to own a home, and but the government is never going to cut into their own revenue. They want to cut into yours, and that I think is fascinating.
Yeah, I think the reason for that is the power in government now really is how much money can we spend on you. So if they cut the amount of money that comes into government, it means they've got less money to spend on the population, but that's
Mm,
how they gain their votes.
mm,
It's
that's interesting.
it's that parent role they're trying to take. You need us, so you best vote for us because you need us. Because look what we're doing. We're paying this for you. We're giving you that. We're paying for these services. You need us, so you better vote for us.
Yeah, yeah. This is the thing I always come back to. It's why I think that one of the things we have to really get right in ourselves as we fight this thing is, you know, well, it is reclaiming a radical sense of self-respect, not
Yeah,
self-love, not self-praise, not, look how great I am, but just fundamental self-respect. Um, because I think if you start with that foundation, you're much less likely to, to fall prey to that kind of seduction. And it is kind of a seduction, isn't it? Here, look at these
yeah,
shiny things. Look at this, look at all this stuff. And like a lot of seductions, um, in in the fairy tales we grew up with, it's not what it seems. You know, the witch that comes at you in the middle of the forest and she looks really beautiful, um, and she's promising you all this, so she's hiding something. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely. Yeah,
When you get back home, you're gonna see what it really is.
yeah.
you know.
The
Um,
nursery write the story of Hansel and Gretel with the
yes,
gingerbread house,
that's
enticing.
right.
Let's go inside.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
There's everything you could ever want. Just look, it's all over the place. Just it's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
yeah,
Well, if something, there's that old saying, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
So this Inflation Reduction Act that they recently passed here that President Biden signed into law here in the U.S. Again, I mean, I'm just a poor dumb software engineer, but I just don't understand how printing money and passing it around is inflation reduction. Maybe I should have gone for an economics degree instead of learning how to write software. But I can't figure that out for the life of me. Can you?
Well, we had a comedy program in the UK in the 1980s called Yes, Prime Minister.
I remember that. Yep.
You remember that?
Yes.
And one of the scenes in that was one of the ministers, government ministers, was talking to the civil service, and they were saying, we're going to set up a freedom of information department. And the civil servant went crazy. What do you mean? We don't want to be telling people what we're doing. And the other civil servant says, don't worry. Always put in the title of your department or of your paper the thing it's not about. It stops people asking questions.
Yeah, that's pretty much right on the money. That's how they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to read that new government piece of legislation. All they're going to read is the headline, which is Inflation Reduction Bill.
Yes. Yes.
And that's just like we had in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill. It was nothing about that. But if you can put it in the headline, then you've won over 99% of the population who are never going to read it.
That's right. That's right. And this goes back to something we're always talking about. I'm part of the Foundation of Society. Well, that's my baby, and we've got this 10-point manifesto. And the very first point in our manifesto is see deeply. And I was talking with Danny Duran from the Infinite Jigsaw podcast a little while ago about the idea of things that capture the idea of allowing your attention to be captured or allowing your attention to be caught, but then not going any deeper. It's like attention. You can use attention as a blunt instrument, right? And that's kind of how they do with us in terms of putting headlines up and putting stories in the news that make a big splash. But then when it comes to using us turning around and using our attention as a precision instrument, that's when we fall off. And I tend to think that's a lot of that is because we're not up to doing the work of doing that. Part of that may be complacency. You and I were talking about that. Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think we went wrong in terms of how we use our attention as opposed to letting it be used against us?
Good question. I think that what popped in my mind when you were saying that was a little bit like when you look on YouTube and you see a thumbnail.
Yeah.
Most people see the thumbnail, read the headline, and then scroll on to the next thumbnail. But if you want the deep thought of that, you've got to click the thumbnail and then watch the 1.5 hour, 2 hour video. That's where you get your information from. But we live in a time, well, it's not even the time now. I think the vast majority of people are followers because we're tribal animals and we're designed to live in tribes where the vast majority of people live their lives and get told what to do to a certain extent. And they're quite happy with that setup because they don't have to worry about other things because the tribal leader will look after defense. The tribal, group will go out for hunting. So people are quite happy. I know lots of people who are quite happy sitting back and going, let them deal with that.
Right. Yeah. The government will. Yeah.
Yeah. But within our societies, there's always, I'm making the numbers up now, 10-15% of people, but it could be higher, it could be lower. I've got no idea who are potential tribal leaders themselves. And we need those people to step up to make sure we're holding everybody to account. But what our societies do now, especially the UK, is because we make life so easy, those potential tribal leaders are never tested throughout their lives, because if they fall on hard times, the state steps in. If they want something, the state will step in, and they're never given an opportunity to put either their life on the line, their reputation on the line, their pride on the line, to fight for something, to do something, and fail or succeed. But you learn from both of those outcomes, and then to go away and feel a little bit more formidable, ready for the next fight, the next test, the next challenge. And we don't have that in our societies anymore. Hence why we've got a whole generation of young men now who are lost, who don't know what it's like to be a man or what the role of a man is in society, because all those tests and challenges have all been removed.
This is a very good point. And you know, as you talk about tribes as well, I think you mentioned the fact that we're social animals. That's obviously correct. But you know, the other thing is that it's not necessarily bad to be social animals. The problem is really that the actual tribes that we're affiliating ourselves with, don't mean us well. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like these are not proper tribes. In other words, I was you know, Abigail, who's part of the Foundationist Society, she sent me a couple of links about one of the medieval guilds. It was the Guild of Brushmakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And turns out back in the old days in England, you know, making brooms and brushes was like a serious craft, you know, and you had to get your straw together, and you had to select the ones that kind of bent the right way, and you had to, you know, dress the end of the stick with hot pitch and wind the string around and do it in just, you know, and do it quickly before the pitch cooled. You couldn't work with it. I mean, this was a skilled trade. Okay. And so there was a guild of brushmakers, and you could see right away that that was a kind of tribe. They had tribal initiation rituals. The apprentices used to really look forward to the time when they were actually inducted into the tribe formally, and it was a big cause of celebration when you went from being an apprentice to being a journeyman. You know, that was a big deal, and you were part of something, and you could go to that tribe. You could go to your guild and say, hey, I'm behind on my rent. Can I borrow this? Or I need this, or I need, in other words, they really looked out for the people, because the tribe operated at a small enough scale that it could look out for its people. And its remit was very specific. It wasn't trying to look out for everybody, right? The Guild of Brushmakers was not trying to make all men good and happy. It's like, we're going to look out for our people. So that's a tribe that makes sense to follow. You can relax and sit back to some extent if you know that your tribal leaders are sound, and you know, it's a relatively small number of people you have to pay attention to. The problem is that government, I think, was never meant to be that kind of tribe. Political parties were never really meant to be that kind. A political party can't do what a guild could do for its people. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like the Democratic Party or Labor or the Tories or any one of these, but they can't turn around and do for their people the way the Guild of Blacksmiths could do for their people, the way the Guild of Brushmakers, the Guild of Bookbinders, the Guild of Stonemasons or whatever could do for their people. And it's so it's almost like the tribal affiliation. The tribalism is not bad in itself. It's bad when it's out of order. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think tribes only work up to a certain size.
Yes.
And that size is when you still know most of the people in that tribe.
Correct.
Because then you have a bond with that person. You know that person. You're less likely then to abuse the system, commit fraud, have other people's poor opinion or not be in the right frame of mind with those people, because you know them personally. Again, because we're social creatures, when a tribe becomes too big, you're then dealing with bureaucrats. You're dealing with faceless people, and there is no bond there at all. And then it feels like charity. Then it also feels like this is something I can take advantage of as well, because There is no faces. I don't know anybody. My reputation's not on the line. But when you're a member of a guild and you're trying to move up the order in that guild, then your reputation's everything.
That's right. That's right. And you have to stand. Your tribe will stand by you, but you in turn have to. Yet one, you have to put the work in, and two, you have to stand by your work. That's the other thing. You're on the hook for something.
Yeah, and you have to buy it. I don't mean buy into it with money, but you buy into this as
Yes.
in, you're attending meetings, you're going to initiation ceremonies,
Yes.
you're taking, when you move up the ladder, you then start taking on lower apprentices so you can help them move up. You have a place and you've had to give time and energy and effort to get to the place where you are. So it does cost you something.
That's right.
And I learned this years ago when I used to run youth projects in Manchester. So we would let's say we were taking a load of kids to a museum.
Mhm.
We'd hire a minibus, we'd have to get the funding, and let's say it cost £500 and we could take 12 kids. And to begin with, it'd be like, who wants to come? It's free. And we'd fill it up within 5 minutes of people saying they want to come. Like, be here tomorrow at 12 o'clock and we'll take you for the day out. Tomorrow would come 12 o'clock and 3 people would turn up out of 12.
Ah,
And then someone pulled me to one side one day, someone who'd been doing this sort of work decades longer than me, and said, Nick, you need to charge them something. Not a lot of money, but they have to buy into coming to this. So then from then on, we always charged them a small nominal fee, and almost everybody always turned up because then they bought into this trip. It wasn't. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. I can't be bothered today. There'll be another trip next week. Who cares? It's free anyway. And if it's free, it's valueless because nothing of value is ever free.
this is very profound. I mean, this is something that I've talked a lot with Danny about, Danny from the Infinite Jigsaw podcast, about belief systems. I mean, that like it struck me really when you said you talk about buying into something and the idea that it costs you. And I've literally said those words to Danny. It's like I remember going through a point in my life where I had all my little beliefs and I was this and that, and had your rebellious little thing going on. And at some point I realized that as satisfying as it was, right, for me as an angry young black man, to blame white folks for everything, as easy as those answers were, the problem was the answers were too easy. They didn't cost me anything. And
Yeah.
I realized they were probably worthless, and they were worthless. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's very interesting, this notion of scale, which is, I think you're definitely right on the money with that. We have to have these affiliations that operate at a smaller scale, and it has to cost you something, not much, but enough that you really are bought in. You're on the hook for something. You're responsible for something. And then you find that, okay, people can get things done. And really, going back to politicians, we see immediately what the problem is. It doesn't cost them anything, really. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like government can't run out of money. It runs out of money, it just raises more taxes or prints more money. And which is also a tax on you anyway. Inflation is just a tax you don't get to vote for. So yeah, that's I think you're right on the money with that.
And that's why we used to have a better sense of community,
Yes.
because those communities where we lived would be, it might just be one street or it might be 2 or 3 streets. And I remember when I was growing up, we had the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana, and we had street parties, and it was organized by all our parents, and they did all the cooking. And you make cakes, you make the sandwiches, you make ice lollies. And because it was only a 1 street or 2 streets, it was successful because everybody who was spending time and money on it wanted it to be a success because they were gaining the benefits for themselves and for their children. And once you start putting your resources into something and it starts going wrong, you have a choice. It's either I can walk away now and I've lost 72 hours of planning and I've spent £34 on stuff, or I pull my finger out and I need to work harder and spend a little bit more money to make this a success.
Mm.
And that's what tends to happen at a smaller scale is you pull your finger out and you work harder because A, you can see the benefits, and B, you know you'll be held responsible by your neighbours and your friends. But when you work in government, you're not held accountable because it's so vast,
Yeah.
and you can be given so many excuses about why it didn't work out. You
Yes.
know, we're all blaming Putin now for the cost of living crisis, and yeah, I'm sure the Russian invasion has played a part in this, but it's a bloody small part.
Yes. Correct. Correct. And exactly, because whatever effect that invasion had is swamped by the effect of saying, you know something, we're going to pick right now to go really, really, really green. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
We're gonna stick with this nonsense net zero policy, and then we're gonna compound it by saying, yeah, we're not gonna dirty ourselves by powering our economy with Russian oil and gas. We're too good for that. You know,
yeah,
you basically, I've just never, you know, that's a part of this thing that still drives me nuts. It's like
yeah,
this idea that you're threatening your enemy, your supposed enemy, by holding a gun to your own head.
yeah,
That's essentially what that's essentially, you know, Putin invades Ukraine, in my opinion, for perfectly valid reasons, because, you know, we had a Cuban Missile Crisis. This is their Cuban Missile Crisis. But regardless what you think about that, our government said, okay, stop or we'll shoot ourselves, and that's what we're
yeah.
doing. You know,
Absolutely. I mean, we never should have been in this position in the first place. Why the UK is relying on Russia and the Middle East?
well, that's the other problem, right?
It's like one of them is, was our long-term enemy, and the country isn't completely stable. The other one's the Middle East, which is almost a basket case,
Right.
and we've spent the last 50 years relying on them when there's so much more we could have been doing in the UK
Oh
to
man.
secure our own energy, and we've
Correct.
done none of it
Yeah.
because it was always easier using Russia and the Middle East.
Well, that's right. Well, that's right. And you know, this, it tied into the this notion that it doesn't matter where you make things. I'm always coming back to making things,
Yeah,
because that's kind of what I identify with. And I can't. I grew up in a middle class, in a work, excuse me, a working class household, and you know, big capital at some point got the bright idea that they could get around tight labor markets by moving labor overseas, but by saying, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to set up factories here. And too many people, too many so-called conservatives who should have known better said, yeah, that's what, it doesn't matter where you make things. Well, of course it matters where you make, of course it matters where your energy comes from. If, of course, having the fundamentals squared away matters. Having a domestic farming sector that's vibrant, having a domestic manufacturing sector, that, of course, these things matter. And a lot of our libertarian brothers were like, well, you know, it's just a free market. It's no, this is not, it's nothing to do with that. You know, you have to have the fun of free markets are wonderful. Markets are great things, but markets are all, you get markets in any case. Everyone's got markets. In the Soviet Union, they had markets. Okay. Um, what's important is having the fundamentals. You have to have and the foundation we're finding out now is not smartphone apps and solar panels. The foundation, and it's not you know, social media, whatever. The foundation is food and manufacturing and energy. If you can feed yourself, if you can make the things you need, and if you can power your civilization, then you can get up on your hind legs and talk about free markets. But if
yeah,
you don't have any of those things, all that stuff is just academic.
mm,
That's like, you can quote Adam Smith to me all day. Adam Smith, very bright guy, wonderful. You can quote this and that and talk about Milton Friedman and Hayek and all this business. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But if you can't feed yourself, if you can't make what you need, and if you can't power your civilization, you're done. You're done. And if you find yourself in that situation, then what you got to do is humble yourself and say, okay, I guess we're going to have to buy what we need from these people. We may not like them, but that's business. And it's shocking to me that especially the Great Britain, which was always its thing, was as a nation was always, we're open for trade. Who wants to do business? It's amazing to me that now your government has gone to this whole this weird kind of morality play that's really just nonsense right down to the core, you know.
I think some good points there. I think the point I would raise would be, you're right, but it depends on what time frame you're looking at. So sending all your production abroad is a fantastic idea if your time frame is only a couple of years at a time. But if your time frame is a medium to long term, then all you're doing then is you're gambling.
Yes.
You're gambling with your economy. You're gambling with whoever you're doing business with, because whoever you're doing business with today can turn into your enemy tomorrow.
That's
You
right.
know, none of this is new. Countries fall out all the time, and that's
right.
what's happened to us. We don't play the long game anymore now. We're always playing short games because we want the reward almost immediately.
That's right.
And someone like Putin has been organizing and selling his gas and oil and selling it to the West so they deplete theirs. He's been doing this for several decades now. It wouldn't surprise me if people like Russia and China and Saudi Arabia, underhand, have been funding all this green nonsense. I know people are saying that's what they've been doing, but I've not seen any evidence. But it wouldn't surprise me, because that's good business sense.
Well, as you say that, I mean, I would say certainly China has been, because you look at where a lot of these solar panels are manufactured. Look at who's doing a lot of the lithium mining in the third world. I mean, it's China, and this is, well, actually, Ben Pyle, Climate Resistance, for those of you listening, CLIM number 8 Resistance on Twitter, has done some excellent work in showing how a lot of this green nonsense is a money grab from giant hedge funds that are very deeply invested in these Chinese companies, for example, that are making solar panels. It's not any kind of deep, dark conspiracy. All the dirt that's really being done is being done in the open. They're not hiding it. It's not hard to see it. It's just you can, some of these companies, you can go and look at their numbers on financial information websites. It's clear. It's right there, hiding in plain sight, so to speak. So yeah, I see what you mean. As you talked about playing the long game, I'm reminded of this. One of my favorite quotes from back in the day. This was, I think it was Lord Viscount Palmerston. I forget which one, the first or second, but Viscount Palmerston, I think it was talking to Queen Victoria, and they were talking about these shifting allegiances, around the world, around Europe and what have you. And she said, well, don't we have any permanent friends? And he said, no, ma'am, no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests, and like, he got it. The Victorians really got it, and it's striking how little time it takes for society or for society's ruling elite to forget those things.
No, I mean, look what happened last year. The British and the Americans stole the submarine contract of France to produce nuclear submarines for Australia. Multi-billion-pound contract.
Yeah.
And now two countries got together and we stole the contracts off France, one of our so-called friends.
Right.
Because it was in our interest to do it.
Yep. And what we're finding too, it's talking about countries pursuing their interests, is that in the so-called global South now, what's happening as people like Joe Biden are running around hat in hand saying, oh, could you pump some more oil to help us keep costs down? Or could you sign on to this resolution, or could you do this, or could you line up with the sanctions policy? These countries are like, no, that's not in our interest. Actually, it's not in our interest. We do business with these guys. India, they early on when we started dropping all these sanctions on Russia, people were very upset with India. I'm like, oh, well, how come you're not? It's like, listen, this is not in our interest. This is your thing. You do what you feel. This is not in our interest. And again, I think you talked about scale earlier. The time scales are all wrong, and in terms of how they analyze these things, and the physical scales are all wrong. Time scales too short, when they plan and when they think about what to do, and the physical scales, the geographical scales are too big. You're early a few months ago, there was this big supply chain crisis, which it was very much in the news. Oh, we're having a supply chain crisis. We're having these problems. It's like, a lot of these supply chains were never really meant to be that big, because the larger and the longer you stretch out a supply chain,
Yeah.
the more fragile it is. And we see that's obvious, or it should be obvious, but not to our so-called leaders, apparently.
No, and especially if they're dealing in vital goods that you need, such as food.
Yes.
Why would you take and open yourself up to such a risk that a civil war in Colombia
Could
can
mess with
affect
you. That's
this,
right.
that messes with that,
Right.
then makes you, have a huge reduction in your importation of coffee or something.
Yes.
And I mean, the UK should know better, because during the Second World War, we almost lost the war because we almost starved, because the German U-boats were trying
right.
to sink all the food ships coming to the UK because they knew they could starve us out, and it almost worked. The UK, we turned almost every piece of land into farming. There were, with the parks in our cities, the a little bit of grass along the side of the road, all those things were dug up, and potatoes were planted, carrots were planted. We were trying to feed the nation. So, and that's only 70 years ago.
Right.
We should remember those days that we almost starved and lost the war.
Yes. Yes. This brings me to the second thing that we're always harping on in the society, which is these archetypes I'm always talking about. The idea of everything that we do as human beings has a forge spirit, which is the spirit of actual work and practical application, and everything has a library spirit, which is the spirit of scholarship and history and documentation and remembering, and everything has a tower spirit, which is the spirit of the moral law and thinking about the higher purpose. And that library spirit is definitely lacking in the sense that we're just you don't remember these things, partly out of complacency. Well, we're good to go now, so we can just, history's over, right? It's the end of history. Sit back and make money, and you forget these fundamental things. And then another few years go by, and then something happens. Next thing you know, you're like, well, what do we do? How do we, because you've forgotten the basics, you've forgotten the fundamentals. Yeah.
And I think that's because we have so many jobs now that, in a certain extent, are meaningless.
Yes.
There's so many jobs that I could sit next to the person now and they could spend an hour telling me what their job is, and I still would be, and that's a job? Where 100 years ago, you'd sit down next to somebody, what's your job? I'm a carpenter. What does that mean? Well, that means I get wood, and then I make the things you need to do your everyday. But now we have people. What's your job? I'm a diversity manager. What does that mean? Well, that means I try to look at a company and see how many black people, gay people, women, and it's like, you're not adding value to anything. You're not creating anything or making anything.
Nope.
I think the only new exception really would be computer programmers.
Yeah.
Because even though they don't create something you can hold in your hands, they still create something. They
Yes.
create a program. They do still create. It's just a modern way, but we have too many jobs that I'm not even sure if we need them.
No, no, we don't.
And I think the people doing those jobs deep down inside know those jobs are useless jobs,
Yes.
or they get no benefit out of it themselves because they never produce anything, or there's never an end moment where they go, look at what we've achieved. Let's say you organize weddings. At least once you complete that wedding, you can turn around and go, that was a great wedding we organized. At least it ended and you could see what your work contributed to.
Yes.
But when you're I don't know, just one of these rubbish jobs that just goes on, and all you're doing is doing something for someone else to read that someone else reads and press these buttons. It's like, and I don't think people get any self-respect or any self-worth out of those jobs.
No.
And they're the jobs that people always refer to as on the treadmill, like
Yes.
a hamster in a treadmill that I just can't stop pedaling. And I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm just going round and around. And it's soul destroying. Here's a good example. So just before Christmas, my stepdaughter had an old rocking horse that was stored in someone's basement that her granddad bought her 40 years ago. And she has a daughter now, my granddaughter. And I thought it'd be lovely for me to get that old rocking horse, take it to a craftsman, and get it all renovated.
Yeah.
That we can then give to our granddaughter, who's 2, and at least then it's a family heirloom. Her mum had it 40 years ago. Now you've got it. So I did some Googling, trying to find someone local, found someone local. He came round, picked it up, did a fantastic job, dropped it off. And I was chatting to him when he dropped it off. And he told me he used to be a banker. And he
Wow.
started renovating furniture at weekends for friends as a bit of fun because he wanted to do something with his hands. And then he got that much work and he started charging people just doing it at the weekends. And then it got so busy, he gave his job up at a bank and now he does it full time. And
Wow.
he said he doesn't earn as much as he did at the bank, but he said he's so much happier. He
Yeah.
went, once I've completed a job, I look at it and I go, I've done that.
Yes.
And that's going in someone's house now. He goes, this rocking horse, a girl's going to get a lot of pleasure now out of this rocking horse. He goes, it makes my job worthwhile.
Yeah.
And people in the modern world don't get that feedback on the value of their time and energy and effort.
You came around to exactly where I wanted to be in this talk because you said feedback. And
Yep.
in my profession, there's kind of a fundamental rule that intelligent behavior is impossible without feedback. That's like a law of cybernetics, of control systems. Intelligent behavior is impossible without feedback. And so you think about what it means when a society starts to go toward, as you say, a lot of these jobs, a lot of these things that don't give you an output, that don't give you any feedback. You can't orient yourself. Am I doing a good job? Is this thing righteous or not? You have no way of knowing because there's no feedback loops.
Yep.
And you can't understand yourself any better. The thing. It's a bit worse in my country than yours in terms of like self-help books, right? That's like a big thing. I think in America is like the number one
Yeah.
producer of self-help books, right? And all these people, so we're publishing all this huge torrent of self-help books every year, and we're miserable as a society.
Yep.
Right? Because the point is not to understand yourself by looking at yourself. The point is not to keep going inward and saying, what's, me. The point is to do something in the world, to create something of value in the world, to do something for somebody, to serve somebody, like I said earlier, to take responsibility for something or somebody, right? Something outside yourself, in other words. you know, and then you see what you see, the results of the work you've put in. And part of the consequence of that is that you understand yourself better. But we're doing it all backwards. We're thinking that we can just turn our gaze inward. My identity, my pronouns, my
Yeah.
feelings, my, you know what I'm saying, my trauma. And then just as a result of that, we're going to somehow get a better world, and we're going to look around and just be satisfied. No, there's nothing to be satisfied with. You got to do something first. You got to do the work. And here's the other thing about what you're saying. It's, last time we talked about how, thinking for yourself is dangerous. And, thinking for yourself is dangerous
Yeah.
because, hey, if you reach a conclusion, that's your conclusion. You did it, that belongs to you.
Yeah.
It seems to me that working in this way, doing this kind, like deciding there has to be an output, means there can be a wrong answer. You can get it wrong. You can make a mistake. And because you're making a thing that other people have to find valuable, they might come back to you and say, hey man, this isn't good enough. And then you got to humble yourself and say, oh man, I've got to do something better. Oh, where did I go wrong? Oh, I did this thing here. Yeah, I should have done that. Okay, next time maybe. Like you have to, and maybe you have to take the L. Maybe you'll eat the cost on that job because I can't really charge you in good conscience. I messed up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let me make it right. You see, but only by doing those hard things, can we get all the good things that we've become accustomed to. We can't just assume the good things as a given and then skip all the hard work. And that's what we've been doing.
And your last phrase was perfect. Skip all the hard work.
Yeah.
And that's why people turn to self-help books.
Yes.
Because they hope someone else has done all the hard work, and all they have to do is pay for it and read it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. And there's many conversations I've had with young people over the last 20 years. And the conversation goes like this. Where do you want to be in life? And the conversation sometimes goes to nowhere. Why haven't you got a dream? I don't want one. Isn't there something when you sleep, something just wish you could be? No. Why? And the answer is always this, once you unpick it and you get them talking to you. The answer is, when I was younger, I tried, but I failed. And people laughed at me. My parents didn't help me back up again. My teachers didn't help me up again. And the lesson I learned was, if you don't try, you don't fail. So I'd rather not fail, which means I don't try.
Wow.
And all those young people needed was a parent or a school teacher to say, oh, that didn't work, but don't worry about it. Let's try something else. Let's see where you went wrong. Stand back up again, push yourself down, give that another go. Because it may not have worked and you may have failed this time, but just because you failed, that doesn't make you a failure.
That's right.
Not trying makes you a failure. You can try 50 times and fail every single one, but eventually you will be successful because something will stick. And every lesson, there's a lesson in every time you fail.
That's right.
But no one ever gave them that information and no one ever supported them. And to come to the conclusion they come to is, I'd rather not try because I'd rather not fail.
That's terrible.
And that is no way to live your life.
No. It's a thing, something that I think as a society, we've become, we're in love with the idea of success, not even success as such, but the idea of success. And we talk about a lot of these people, Silicon Valley millionaires, people like Elon Musk, and it's like, oh, this person is so, but we don't, I think, because we've gotten out of touch with our working class roots, our agrarian roots, our blue collar roots, our industrial roots, because we've gotten out of touch with that. We don't understand how much trying is involved, how much just sitting in the lab or the workshop or sitting over the book late at night or whatever, how much of that is involved in a success. You know, that saying, it took me 20 years to become an overnight success, right?
Yeah.
We're not, and you're right. We're not teaching kids this. I mean, you happen to have worked in your charity and your day-to-day work. You're working with a lot of kids who are really kind of out on the edge, living rough, so on and so forth. But I would say even kids who came up in a middle-class environment, they got the same problem. They've got the same problem there because we've spent all this time softening all the edges. We've kind of feminized society, and we're there to catch someone and keep them from actually falling. You know, the whole thing of getting up presupposes that you fell in the first place. And I think that's the thing, you know, talking something that you and I are always talking about, which is the importance of fathers. And of course, we don't just mean the importance of fathers just as human beings. We also mean the importance of that masculine principle in the family and in society. And that's a principle of social challenge and the acceptance of risk. You have to fall. And then I'm going to tell you, okay, come on, kid, that's all right. You got to get up. But I can't tell you to get up if I'm there with outstretched arms to keep you from falling in the first place. And that's no good. Now, if I keep you from falling, well, it's true. You'll never fall. You'll never feel the pain of falling. But you have to go through that feedback loop. You have to actually hit the ground and be like, damn, that hurt. You know, and then the spirit of the father is what confronts you and judges you and says, hey, man, I don't want to hear that. I can't shit. I don't want to hear that. Get up. Come on, kid.
Yeah.
You can do this, you know. And it strikes me that this is a fundamental thing that we've done to ourselves. And look, the bad news is that it's had terrible results. The good news is that it's something we've done to ourselves, so we can undo it. It's something that we can undo, but we just have to do that. We have to decide that this matters. And rounding out this stream, I want to come back to this book, which is still, you know, everyone's waiting with bated breath for it to be finally published. But this is your book that's coming out. It's called The Making of a Beggar, right?
Yeah.
And is this your second or third book?
Second
book. What was the first one?
It was called Lessons in Courage.
Lessons in Courage. So those of you listening, go out and get yourself a copy of Nick Buckley's Lessons in Courage. And at some point, your publisher is going to get their shit together and get this next book out there. But, you know, The Making of a Beggar, we talked a little bit about what you were trying to get across in this book. And what strikes me is, and I wanted to get your take on this, is, you know, there's a sense in which, right, if all you are is a petitioner, right?
Mm-hmm.
If all you're doing is asking for something, then there's a sense in which you can never fail. Because what you can tell yourself is, well, you know, that person was just mean. They're ungenerous. They're stingy. They're whatever. They're racist. They're sexist. They're whatever. They didn't give me what I asked for, right? And so that notion, it's the spirit of the beggar, I think, is alive in that sense. That it's that beggar spirit.
Yeah.
Insulates us from the risk of failure. You're only asking for things. You're never asserting things by doing things in the world. What's your take on that?
That's a good point, because that's what we do in the UK to our government and the welfare state. The criticism all the time is, you're not giving us enough. It's never, you're not creating opportunities so I can earn what I want. We never have that criticism. It's always, you're not giving us enough free money. You're not giving us enough of this, enough of that. And it's become it's become a trap in the UK. And I understand where it's come from. We've talked about social creatures and with a tribal animal. And I think it starts there, where in a tribe, the top members would look after the lower members with food and protection and things like that. And it's come out of that and then into the nation state. And then when we developed our welfare system, it was somebody taking care of you and giving you things. And it's very seductive. Who doesn't want to be given free things that you don't have to work for? So it's been very seductive. And the more it happens, the more the next generation is slightly damaged and slightly less hardworking, because what kept us working hard 100 years ago would have been not knowing how hard poverty is.
Yes.
And you see the poverty and you go, I need to work harder than what I'm doing because I need to avoid that for me and my family. And that kept you working. That kept people inventing new ways of doing things
Yes.
because the incentive was there not to live in poverty. Where I look at my culture now, pardon me, and it's like, where's the incentive to go the extra mile, to invent something, to do something? And it's like, well, the incentive is, well, the government will take 70% of it in taxes.
Right.
Well, that's a great incentive to make people work harder. And there's no incentive, and we just keep damaging individuals more and more and more.
Yes. Yes. Well, uh, this is a good this is a good place for us to round out the stream. I think we, it seems to me that I mean, the formulas are all there. Everything is still there
Yeah,
for us to succeed, for us to turn things around. But as you and I are always saying, it has to start with us. Yes, elections matter, of course, but they don't matter as much as we think they do.
yeah,
Politics is important, but it's not all important. And I think what I said, I forget who I was talking to. It might have been James Dellingpole, but I was saying that when you hear people say, well, who are our next leaders going to be? Don't worry about who the next leaders are. We're going to get good leaders when we have a culture that is worthy of good leaders, because the good leaders will come from that culture. They'll come from us. But it's not going to do us any good to look at these broken institutions we have now and expect people to come out of that structure and do good things for us. We have to start by building good things and doing good things. And they can be small things at first. In fact, they probably should be. Pick a goal that's small, that's achievable, that you can succeed or fail relatively quickly. And if you
yeah.
fail, then take that failure and think about it and get up and go again. But this I think is the thing we need in your country and mine. We need people not to say that won't work. Prove that it won't work by doing it. by trying to do it, or
It's
prove it
easy
will
to
work.
be a critic.
It's easy to be a critic. It's easy to be a critic. Oh, that's a terrible idea. That's never. How do you know? Did you try? Really? Then what are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well,
That's right.
most of the time when people say that, what they mean is, I want that to fail because I was too lazy and incompetent
To
to
do it
come up with an
myself.
idea myself.
Yes,
So I
sir.
hope your idea fails because it'll make me feel better.
That's right. That's right. And that's as opposed to the thing of, hey, wait a minute, that's a good idea. Hey, let me help you with that. Oh, you know
Yeah.
something? What about or what about this? What about being like an actual candid critic, a positive critic, and say, hey, you know something? Yeah, that's a good idea, but you're forgetting this. You might need to do this and this and this. This, if we can get back to that spirit of building things and growing things, and we can get back to that courageous love
Yeah.
of our fellow citizen, and that courageous outlook on life, and that willingness to hurt, the willingness to get hurt and to fall and to be disappointed, the willingness
Yeah.
to say, oh man, that was terrible, okay, what's next? If we can get back to that, then one way or another we're going to be all right, because there's haven't I can't figure out a problem we haven't been able to solve, an earthly problem we haven't been able to solve,
Exactly.
just by paying disciplined attention to it. But we're caught up right now in paying attention to a lot of unearthly problems that there's no solution for. We're going to solve racism. No, you're not. You're not going to cleanse the human heart. And if you think you can, you don't deserve to be trusted with power
Yeah.
ever. You know what I'm saying? And being black, I obviously have no use for racists, but this is the thing we have to focus on. And yeah, I'm always glad to talk with you about this, because there's as you know, you can always find people who complain about how bad things are, but it seems like every time I talk to you, you always come back around to, this is what we can do, this is what we need to do. Let's get on with it. And that's the spirit we need more of.
Absolutely. I held a free speech event a couple of weeks ago in Manchester, and I told the audience, because some of the audience were a little bit pessimistic about free speech, that, you know, we've lost it, it's never coming back. And I said to the audience, all you need to do is solve 1/68th of a millionth of the problem.
That's right.
Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. You solve your bit of this puzzle. And
That's
if we
right.
all do our little bit, we can solve anything.
That's right.
And then to follow up on one of your final points, which was when you fail and you hit the floor, and there's lessons to be learned there. But there's also the biggest benefit you develop and you get when you fail, especially the first times you fail, is you realize you're not as weak and fragile as you thought you were.
That's right.
And it doesn't end your life. And failing isn't as painful as you thought it was going to be. And failing doesn't kill you. That's the biggest lesson you learn, because then that makes you more formidable. You'll take other chances. You'll do things again, because what's the worst that can happen? I failed last time and I was fed up for 2 days. Was that it? So therefore, you'll try again and again, knowing it's not going to kill you.
That's right. Well, Nick Buckley, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I can't wait to when your book finally comes out. The making of a bigger.
Hopefully about a fortnight. We're looking at now.
Couple weeks. Okay. So yeah, I'll be. I mean, you know, you and I are in touch, so we'll be keeping an eye on that, because definitely when that comes out, you and I definitely have to get on and do a stream about that and dig that up some more.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, thanks for being on this stream with me. This is the second one of these things that we've done, these YouTube live streams, and I like it. It's a lot of fun.
No, it's good. I always enjoy chatting to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, brother. All right, so I'll talk to you next time. Those of you, how can people find you? How can people get in touch with you?
I'm all over social media, so if you just look for Nick Buckley MBE, I've got a Substack account that I write almost weekly in. That's free, so sign up to that. And I'm doing a lot of work now on YouTube, Nick Buckley MBE. Find me on YouTube, subscribe.
All right, thanks, man. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.
That's great. Cheers. Bye-bye.
All right.